Hi all. Today is the evening of Monday, October 6th. Bitcoin is trading at $125,185. And yesterday it set a new historical maximum, and today it set a super new historical maximum. Well, all that remains for us to figure out is what to expect from this market movement. Let me say right away that, in general, analyzing the highs, historical highs of any instrument is quite difficult. Why? Because entering a position, a long one, yes, is very risky at the highs, but you cannot enter a short position at the highs because you have to wait for some bearish engulfing patterns, corresponding reversal structures, signals. And this means that at historical highs, unless you took a long position in advance, all you can do is just sit and wait to see how things develop. That's pretty much the situation right now. So if you have a long position, you hold on to it. If you have a short position, if you have a short, I don't envy you at all. You should set a stop loss. But if you don't have a position, then in this case you should stay out of the market. Those are the rules. This is trading, technical analysis. You should think first and foremost about risks, about how not to lose money, not about how to make it. Making money is a secondary goal. The primary one is not to lose it. Well, now let's switch to the chart and try to extract something from it to understand what we can count on. So, in the previous video, we were in the $120,000 area. I said there were two options. The first option is to move towards the $123,000 area, but in that case, it's almost certain that the historical high will be updated, after which there are chances to go down to the area of 119, maybe even 117, and the second option was to go to 117.5 thousand. But as you can see, we followed the first scenario. Right now, I haven't changed any of the colorings or markings here at all. I'll probably leave them as they are. At this moment, we are practically in the very zone that I marked as the target growth area. This absolutely does not mean that the price cannot go higher, but let's study this further. So I will remove all the markings completely. And what do we see? We see a consistent upward movement, not a single red candle. Each candle is consecutively setting a new high. And let's say on a fairly standard volume. So this is a steady, even movement. There are no sharp impulses here. And this suggests that this upward movement may continue. Now let's move on. There's nothing more to say here. That is to say, we can only confidently state that first of all, we currently have this significant historical high, which we might indeed test or re-evaluate at some particular point. But whether to initiate a long position directly from it, I am genuinely uncertain. Instead, it is absolutely essential that you observe some very specific, high-quality correction from which you can then confidently make a purchase. Right now, I can't even guess where this correction might be. It might happen, it almost certainly will, but we'll talk about it when it actually occurs. When we see at least some kind of bearish engulfing on the daily candles. Until that happens, it's impossible to talk about any kind of reversal, and considering any shorts is simply out of the question. Alright then, let's take a look at the weekly candles. There's really nothing much to draw here. Notice that last week, it closed higher than anything in Bitcoin's history before. First and foremost, we're talking about the weekly candle's closing price. And secondly, we're talking about the all-time high, which was also set on this candle, a full-fledged growth candle. Yes, it doesn't have a huge volume, but probably only a small number of people entered the market and were willing to support this growth at all-time highs. Nevertheless, there isn't a single reason to talk about short positions. This current week has, as expected, already updated the previous high, and accordingly, the all-time high. What can we expect? Well, we can expect a pullback to this area, the area of this high. That is where we had the range in which we traded for a long time. That's 19,500. We have a very large untraded zone at this green candle. And a return at least to the area of 19,000 to 19,500 looks quite likely from the perspective of weekly candles. This doesn't mean the market will definitely go down, but it does mean that when the price reaches the area of 19 to 19,500, in that case it makes sense to consider opening a long position if the appropriate structures appear. It's very important here not to see some kind of engulfing or a huge red candle on the weekly chart. In other words, we'll only know what it will look like at the end of the week. In the middle of the week, it might reach somewhere around 119,000, and by the end of the week, it could pull back to around 135, for example. That's it. Now let's take a look at the monthly candles, even though it's a bit premature. Look, the October candle is trading even above the historical maximum at the moment. Well, obviously, it's only the first week of October right now. And accordingly, there's still a lot of time left before we can draw any conclusions. But if the October candle were to close like this today, I would say that there's a very high probability we would see further upward movement in the form of a new one. A historical maximum next month, but for now it's too early to talk about that. However, if the October candle closes at least in green, and ideally, really ideally, above the level of $115,700, that is above this red one, it would indicate a continuation of growth. But if it closes below $115,700, then there are different possibilities. Perhaps it was just a stop-loss hunt before working off this red candle and moving further down. And finally, if we see that this candle closes with a red body at the end of October, well then it's time to pack it in because we're getting ready to dive. Now let's look at the 4-hour time frame. The review turns out to be quite simple because there's nothing to invent here. Pay attention to an interesting thing. Our price highs are rising consecutively, one after another. Even here in the current 4-hour candle, the high was updated. But the RSI highs, here's one, here's a lower one, and here's an even lower one. What does this mean? This indicates a divergence. And I should say, here's one high, two highs, three highs. But the RSI at these highs is at least not rising and is even decreasing. So here we are currently expecting a double divergence because the RSI is still moving upward. And it can go much higher. But for now, the formation of a double divergence on the 4-hour candles is anticipated. And if we see an engulfing pattern here, preferably after a new high is set, of course a bearish engulfing pattern, then at that point it might be worth considering a short position with a stop above the high of the red engulfing candle. Although this engulfing could happen over several candles. That's it, that's all for now. In other words, the growth could continue indefinitely. Where it will continue, I have no idea. We just see that it keeps going. If you have a long position, it makes sense to hold it. If you have a short position, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes because it's unclear when this growth will end. But if this growth corrects in the short term, right here and now, in the coming hours or days, then it has every chance to go down to the area of 119,500 or even $117,000 because that's the bottom of the range. Well, let me show you. Maybe you don't understand because I look at this chart. I practically know it by heart. Look, here we had the top of the range at $119,500 and here is $117,000. This was the bottom. Yes, there was a more local low, but we traded here for a very long time as well. So that's $117,000. We could go there too. But when that will happen, or if it will happen at all, I don't know. I don't know. Subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find honest reviews, no hype. Here you'll only get honest and accurate analysis. If you were in the Telegram channel, by the way, for example, this afternoon or evening, I forwarded my analysis from the private channel. The analysis I did in the morning. And there I said that there are absolutely no short signals showing up on the chart. So at best, Bitcoin, or in the worst case, it will either move sideways or start forming some reversal patterns. But for now, it's still a long. Was it possible to enter it? That's a debatable question. Of course, it's easy to be smart now and say you could have bought in the morning and sold in the evening. But it was a long and it remains a long. See you next time. Goodbye.